Good morning, physiologist friends. We are starting quarter 4, so welcome. Here we go, the home stretch of the year. Crazy as it may seem. A couple things before we get going. I cleared up all the Zoom security questions, as you may already know. So I am, in a couple of days, going to try and um, set up a thing where we can get together and chat during our scheduled 6-hour extravaganza. So, about 120 for half an hour and stuff, just so we can all get together and talk about stuff and everything else. And try and get this class a little more interactive, which is really what makes it work and better is when we can discuss with each other. The other reason for that is I still want to next week um, work on it. It's one of the mandates in theory by Dr. Jensen is that we do have our cooperative quizzes every week. Certainly on a little bit of a hiatus as we work through this online stuff. And as a CIS cohort, we've been meeting every week to talk about best practices and how people are making it work with their different online stuff and things they can do. So um, we're going to try and get to that direction anyhow. That's it. And so we're going to try. And then the last thing, and we'll talk about this all together as a first group, I'll just throw it out there right now, but as we later in the week try and do a all together class session for about 30 minutes of discussion. The university, of course, made some changes and stuff, and you may hear about this. In general, during a normal year, high school students in CIS are only offered the A through F selection on their grades. They have a setup similar to our pass no credit is called S or N, satisfactory, non-satisfactory. Because of distance learning and everything else going on, they have opened up and offered that as a possibility for high school students, but we've discussed it as a cohort. The CIS administration joined our meeting to talk about it, and it really is strongly discouraged to go that way, especially for folks. You guys have been doing this all year and everything else, and what your transcript from the U would look like with an S, satisfactory, and an N, non-satisfactory, would be not good. Would be not good. You are already doing much better than the standards for the S versus N, which is basically if you get an S, that means at minimum you were a C minus. So to get the N, you'd have to be a D or an F. And the S is kind of looked at more like you were right there, probably close to the D F border. So you don't want that. Really, you don't want that visual. And that was a strong thing, is that are generally the CIS high school students um, are getting grades that you wouldn't want to qualify for or try that stuff. Really where they're using it, and this is where they decide to keep high school students in there, where it's really getting used at the university is kids who are now stuck, students or foreign student, any student, and a lot of them are maybe homeless, have nowhere to go. If they're a foreign student or something else, they're sleeping on friends' couches or somewhere, this and that. They have no access to stuff, and they're really struggling. That's kind of the idea. Anyhow, I talked about that longer than I wanted to. We'll address that as a group. You may see something from the school too, who was putting together something on that, but we'll discuss that as a group. Sorry for dragging on. Okay. We've done some stuff with Ebola. Hopefully you have, and if you haven't, continue. We're not going to talk about it today, but that New England Journal of Medicine article that I just wanted to see physiology that you've learned during the year. Like I believe there was discussion. I'm going to go back and highlight some stuff, but about receptor regulation, down regulation, up regulation, that kind of thing. Good stuff that might help you understand. But we're tying that all together, bringing it into our other circulatory system, the lymph. So this is where we kind of left off, and we just went through the basics of the lymph system, and then I gave you some questions. You can see where it goes to and where it rolls through. And again, the lymph system, the whole idea of it is that it keeps your blood volume up by getting the interstitial, the fluids and the plasma proteins and things back that through the vessel system, through the open vessel system that did not diffuse back and forth through the capillaries during normal exchange anyhow. And then I gave you a bunch of questions to answer, and then that fun article to go through. But anyhow, let's look at some of these questions as a setup to where we're going next, because we gave the basics on lymph. Then, as you're going to see towards the end, the question is, okay, what does your body do then? And of course, some of this from being sick with fevers and everything else, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So the first question is, what are antigens? And that's pretty much a straightforward thing. Let's give you a pretty picture here. It's really anything that may come in, and I've moved my face, try and find a good spot for this. It's really anything that is a foreign invader, a pathogen. So a bacterial infection, a viral infection, some toxin you may get in, different types of worms and stuff that might invade your body, tapeworms, blah, 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 blah. Fungi, I'm a fungi. Anyhow, you can see here an antigen is really anything, and excuse me, more than that, it's really anything that your body perceives as not you, in the self versus non-self, and in all the stuff on your cells, outside of your cells, the glycoproteins and stuff that identify you as you, and anything that would then trigger that immune response. So whether it's bacteria here, it's anything that your body doesn't recognize. And that's the problem that some folks have with autoimmune diseases. There was a discussion on the news today of, does celiac disease have a COVID-19 connection and being more susceptible to stuff? And while there is no direct study or evidence that says that celiac disease people are more susceptible to COVID-19, it does have an immune suppression component, and folks with celiac might have other issues with their immune system, or kind of related to what the celiac does. So while the celiac itself may not, anybody who's immune suppressed is going to have more issues with stuff. But so any antigen that comes in and then triggers that immune response, which here, the little Y-shaped things, if you remember a little bit of biology stuff, are the antibodies that are there to help grab and recognize and in that immune response, as we're going to talk about in the next day or so, is hold on and then signal that, hey, the killer cells and stuff come in and can wipe it out. So that's anything that would get into your body that's a pathogen and would trigger that immune response. Okay. So then our next question was, how does coronavirus, COVID-19, get into the blood or inside the cell? And into the blood is, if you're interpreting what we're saying about lymphatics, is understandable that you're breathing in these things, respiratory, they're going to get into the bronchioles and stuff and travel to the lungs where the exchange takes place with gases and capillaries and stuff in the alveoli. But there's also the lymph system there. So while the viruses themselves are too large, they can follow the lymph system to get into the blood. And then inside the cell, which was more of the biology review, is then what are viruses and what do they do? And how do they get in there? So that was more the question I was looking for you to ponder, is not so much the blood, because we kind of led to that with, if they can get into the body, then they can easily, through the lymph system, find ways to get dumped into the bloodstream. but then it's more into the cell. But then they can follow the blood, which, connecting with cells, or they're just in there with cells. It's a respiratory illness, so it starts in the lungs. They find their way through the bronchioles. They can start infecting cells in the stuff. But anyhow, all that's there. So how does stuff get in a cell? And again, excuse me, a little biology 101. Remember that viruses are basically just a protein coat, sometimes with a little envelope around it that comes from your own cells to help protect it as it tries to fool the immune system. And then it just has some sort of genetic DNA or RNA material in it. It could be either. This picture has RNA. So you have this protein coat right here. You have this protein coat right here. You have your genetic material. And then this one happens to have an envelope. And viruses are as varied as what they infect. Whether it's a bacteriophage into bacteria or whatever it would be, okay? And they really have one job. They will attach, it's very much like enzymes and everything else, specific receptors, lock and key kind of method of the types of, and what they do then is they just attach to the cell, insert their DNA, basic or DNA or RNA material, and in some way, shape, or form, now this one's an RNA one, they take over the body's machinery, not to do what the cell normally does, but to produce more of the virus. Okay. And that's what you see here. They incorporate the viral genome into then taking over the cell's production of stuff, and they make more of itself. And then you can see part of the way they get that envelope to help kind of fool is they butt off of your cells and then go spread more viruses around that can infect more cells. So a little biology there. So that's really how they can get in and kind of hijack your system into doing stuff along that way. Okay. Then here's the big one. With no pump like the heart, how does lymph flow back to the heart? Especially if you think of the lower extremities and the gravity that they're fighting against to get back up to the heart. And it goes to a similar circulatory system question. Is, as we were looking at the circulatory system and pressure and everything else, all the pressure came from the heart, and the highest pressure was coming out of the aorta. And then it dissipated down to, pressure and flow dissipated down as you got to the capillary exchange so they could do things. And then if you looked at the structure of veins versus arteries, there's really nothing in veins. We didn't quite get that far, but there's really no, very little musculature and stuff in veins. I mean, they can do a little vasoconstriction and vasodilation. But again, fighting gravity is all that blood getting back to the heart. Now, in the closed circulatory system, you have at least the blood flow to push. Okay. So if nothing else, you at least have blood flowing through the system to keep pushing the blood through, even against gravity. Sometimes doesn't always work so well, as you've seen in like funny videos, shows and everything else. And as you've noticed, if you stand for a long period of time and you are sedentary and you are not moving, then you've seen in funny videos or something, or maybe you felt it yourself where you've had to stand for a long time and you've started feeling dizzy and stuff. Well, even though that blood is pushing itself through, it is slowing down with gravity and everything else, and you can have essentially a vagal response where it seems that, your blood entering the heart is slowing down. So that's a trigger for heart rate and stuff. Heart rate can slow down. Of course, then things are going slower to the brain and everything else, and you can have a vagal response and faint. You've seen it I don't know if you've seen it, but it can happen at, say, weddings when they're standing there and doing stuff. So how do you get the blood flowing? And this is the same thing with the lymph, since the lymph vessels follow blood vessels very closely. One of the keys is skeletal muscle and movement. If you work on your feet a long time, they say to keep kind of shifting legs and moving back and forth and doing some movement. It's an actual around the vessels, the skeletal muscles in the legs and stuff you want to move, because as they contract, they pump. And so the skeletal muscles help work as pumps. So that's one method of how then you get the lymph back up through the heart, is as it's following the circulatory system itself very closely, all the vessels together, then movement helps keep it pumping. Okay. So then that led to the next question. We'll talk about that more as we get going, but that's the basic idea. Skeletal muscle is very huge in moving stuff around the body. But that led to this question: what's an edema in and of itself, and how does that relate to what we're doing now? Well, an edema, and I've got a couple of pictures here, which not necessarily lymph related, but it's any swelling of tissue, and it's really that interstitial tissue. It might be damaged and leaking from the cells as their interstitial fluid leaks and stuff, certainly edema. You certainly can also have an edema like you see in this guy's leg here, and I'm not saying this is it, it's just a picture I got off the internet. But what if you had damage to the lymph system, or a blockage in the lymph system, or an issue with your lymph nodes and stuff? You could get that back up. Or what if you do things, here's one, a breast cancer one. Oftentimes when, not oftentimes, but when you have surgery or mastectomy, or any type of stuff dealing with breast cancer, then they will also go in and check the surrounding area. So like under the armpits and stuff, where you have a lot of lymph nodes and things going on, they will remove those. Also, some of the lymph vessels and lymph nodes there, for the reason of testing them to see if cancerous cells have metastasized, or if they have metastasized, to get that lymph area out of there. And what you'll see with both men and women, higher prevalence in women, is that then there's a lot of swelling and stuff, because now you've lost that circulatory system of the lymph system to bring the fluids back. So now it dissipates by diffusion, which takes much longer. So you do see some swelling and experience swelling and stuff more in that area where they would have removed that stuff. So there's many reasons why, but that's one indicator that maybe there's a lymphedema, is something that has gone wrong with the lymph system. It also could be an infection or damage or stuff, and that brings it all into those triggers. Then that gets us to our next question, where we're going to set you off on your work today. What does your body do? What does your body do? Nice typing. What does your body do to protect you? And what happens when a pathogen invades? And that's immunity. And so your work today, you're going to download a packet, group work packet, but you're going to work on it individually right now until we set up our class later. So please answer everything individually, but it's all about immunity, and kind of giving you an idea of what's your first line of defense, what's your second line of defense, as pathogens try and invade. So that's the job. As you download, it's called Types of Immunity. Download it, go through it as an individual, and then in a couple of days, when I set up an all-together social hour, a half-hour class time for us in our designated time, then we're going to come back and talk about it as a group. I'll even kick into breakout groups if nobody's done that for you on Zoom yet. It's kind of a nice way where you can break a bigger group into smaller groups, and you'll go through some of this stuff together. Anyhow, there we go. I look forward to us having a Zoom meeting and breakouts, because I honestly do miss all of you and being in class and having discussions and having fun and cracking jokes and everything else. But at least we can try and do it on Zoom. So download that, get to work on it. It's like I said, today and a little bit tomorrow. Tomorrow you don't necessarily have to finish it all today, but get to work on that. And then in a couple of days, I'm going to set us up to that during that normal 1 o'clock office hour from like 1:20 to, 2, or not even that long, 1:20 to 1:50, half an hour at the most, that we will be together as a group talking about the immunity packet. So there you go. Have a great day. Stay healthy, and we will talk to you soon.